Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to capture a cabochon with wire so you can achieve something that looks a bit like this. So quite a simple look to it, and also quite a simple technique, but you can get a nice neat finish like this. And it's nice and secure in there, it's not going to go anywhere, so you can then use it for whatever you want, a necklace or anything like that. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are the things that I'm going to be using. Now the wire that I'm using here, two different gauges, they're both regular round wire, and this is a 1mm wire, and that's going to kind of be the strength of the piece and the actual part that's going to capture the stone. And then this is a 0.6mm wire, and this is what we're going to use to do the small wraps with to keep the 1mm wire together. And then we'll also need whatever stone or cabochon that we want to capture with the wire. And the one that I'm using here is an oval shaped cabochon, and it's a purple agate. And this one measures 3.5 by 4.5 centimeters, but you can also use this technique for other sizes and shapes of cabochons as well. And then we'll also need a selection of pliers, so let's get all the materials together and let's get started. Now what I'm going to be using here is 3 lengths of my 1mm wire, and they're each about 30 centimeters long. And these are going to work fine for the size cabochon that I'm using. If you're using a bigger stone of some sort, then you might want to cut your lengths of wire a bit longer as well. And then as for the 0.6mm wire that we're just going to wrap a few sections with, you can either leave it on the reel and just work off of that. That's what I'm going to be doing. It's just to have as minimum wastage as possible. Or you can cut a few small lengths off. So just a few inches per length is all you're going to need. But it's completely up to you what you feel most comfortable with. And then to prepare our wires here, what we need to make sure of is that they're nice and straight, so they don't have any obvious kinks in them. What you can do is either use your hands and your fingers just to smooth them out. It's going to warm them up as well and make them ready to work with. Now when I say smooth and straight, it doesn't have to mean that it sticks straight. So like this, what you just need to make sure of is that they don't have any bends or kinks in them. So a bit of a curve still is fine. That's completely alright. You can also use something like some nylon coated pliers here and just run them through, and that will help straighten out your wire as well. So either way, that's most comfortable for you. So you want to make sure that all your wires are nice and even and without any kinks and bends in them. So now that we have our wires ready here, what we need to do is start doing our first wrap to kind of secure them in place. So what you want to do is find about the middle, put all your ends together, and then find about the middle of your wires. So you can either measure or just do that by eye. So once you have about the middle, that's where we want to do our first wrap. So that's why I'm going to get my 0.6mm wire out. And then I'm just going to leave a short tail just to kind of help to begin with, to hold on to. But then what we need to do is start wrapping this around the 3 wires. So the 3 base wires here, what we need to make sure of is that they lie flat right next to each other throughout this wrap. So once you're doing that, you want to kind of wrap your 0.6mm wire here around quite tight, but not so tight so they kind of, the base wires start to stagger on top of each other. So just do this a couple of times. Just go around the one, towards the one side here first, and then I'm just going to move over to using the tail. Now like I said, you can also cut off short lengths of wire and just do this, or you can work off the reel. That's completely up to you and what you feel comfortable with. But what you're doing here, just make sure that the wraps that you're doing lie nice and tight together, and if you can't quite achieve that as you're wrapping, just get it the best you can. And you can also always take your chain nose pliers or flat nose pliers and then kind of press them together. That's going to really tighten it up and look a lot neater then. Now how many wraps you do here is completely up to you. There's no specific set that you have to do, but I would say a minimum of 3 to 4 wraps is what you have to do at least, just to make it nice and strong. But so far I've got 5. Now I kind of like to do about 6 or so. It's completely personal preference. And also it depends how you want your piece to look. So like that. So I'm just going to squeeze them together again. And still, for now, this can still move on your base wires. So it can move up and down here. So just kind of still try and keep it in the middle. You can always move it once you kind of settled with the amount of wraps that you've done. But then what we need to do is go to the back here, because we need to finish off this 0.6mm wire, and what we need to make sure of is to finish off the ends on the same side here. So we have the very short tail that I can't use anymore, so what I'm going to do is go in and cut that down because we don't want it sticking out. Right now it's sticking up from the top there. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is cut it down so the very end is on one side and right in the middle basically. So cut it down like that, and then just press down that very end just a bit like that, just so it doesn't stick out too much. And then the other side here, the same principle. So just lay it across the back, make sure you're finishing off these ends on the same side, and just go and cut that off towards the middle of that side. And again, just squeeze down that end. So there we basically have the first wrap in place, and we'll still make sure that the base wires are lined right next to each other and not kind of staggering on top of each other. But then now what we need to do is actually secure this in place so that it no longer moves up and down the base wires. So just take a minute and look at it, make sure it's still in the middle, or if it's not, then move it to the middle. And then what we need to do, now you can either use some nylon coated pliers for this to try and make sure you don't scratch the wire, or you can also use your chain nose pliers or flat nose pliers, whichever you're most comfortable with. Now all we'll be doing is squeezing this down, so it shouldn't really scratch your wire too much. It's only if you kind of move your pliers on your wire that's you're going to get marks in that. So whatever pliers you're comfortable with, and then once you're happy with where your wraps are sitting on your base wires, just place your wires on top, and then you want to just squeeze down. So just like this, and then just can always go back and forth, squeeze them together if they open up a little bit, and then squeeze them down again. And then by doing this, it's going to ensure that they basically really capture the base wires there, so you won't be able to anymore move it up and down. So that's why you got to make sure that this is in the middle now though, because you can't move it anymore after this. So once you're happy with this and it looks nice and neat, what we need to do is then start shaping this into the shape of the cabochon. So you just want to bring that into it here, and then what we just need to do is take a bit of time and start creating the shape. Now what you want to do is this wrap that we've done to sit on the bottom. If you have an oval shape on the bottom like this in the middle, obviously if you have a teardrop shape or something else, whatever you have, just this needs to be set at the bottom of your cabochon in the middle as well. And then the rest needs to be formed around in the same shape as the cabochon. So just take some time here to do that. Gentle curves. Do a bit at a time, measure it against the cabochon, see where you're at, and just try and make sure to keep that wrap in the middle. So just take a bit of time doing this and just kind of shape it so it becomes a little bit further up than the sides, the middle and the sides here. Because then that's what we need to do in next wrap. We just need to get the kind of the bottom half of the shape in place first, so it hugs the cabochon just right. So I just need to do a little bit more, but just take a bit of time doing this to get the right shape. So now that we have the shape in place and it fits nicely around the cabochon here, just a bit past the sides there, and you have your wrap right at the bottom, remember what you got to make sure of as well is where we finished the wraps, so the wires was on one side, so the same side, that's the side that you want to turn inwards towards the cabochon, because it's going to be hidden there basically. The ends are going to be hidden instead of being on the outside, then they might end up catching on something. So we want to hide all the ends in towards the cabochon, but then now what we need to do is wrap the same way like this up on the sides. And for this we want to get a 0.6mm out again, so the same that we used for the wrap on the bottom. And then what I'm just going to do is use the cabochon as a bit of a guide, because to find roughly about the middle on the wires there, it's not completely crucial to do exactly the middle, because we will be able to move them up and down, just like in that one, but just so you find roughly where the middle is. So keep hold of that, and then the same way as before, just leave a bit of a tail, and then start wrapping your 0.6mm around your 3 base wires there. Again, just like before, making sure that your base wires align flat next to each other and not on top of each other in any way. So wrap around a few times. And then what I like to make sure of is, it's completely personal preference still, I would still say a minimum of 3 or 4 wraps here, but I personally like to make sure that I do the same amount of wraps on all the places where I'm going to wrap the wire here. But obviously you can do more or less, that's completely up to you, and it can also be a design feature as well as practical. I'm just wrapping the tail around, until I reach my 6 wraps, making sure that the tail finishes on the inside. I'm just going to double check. I just need one more, so I'm just going to use the long end here to get that to the inside as well. So just like this, and as you can see, it can move up and down still, and that's absolutely fine. So I'm just going to finish off these wires, same principle, cut them off on the inside. Remember to do it on the inside, the same as the bottom one. Now you've already shaped it, and then do it in the middle of that side. So that way the ends of your wire there will be hidden in towards the cabochon. And now remember before what we did was squeeze this down. In this case we are going to just squeeze the ends in a little bit, so just gently press them in so they're not sticking out too much. And also what I'm going to do is just make sure that they're nice and close together, the wraps. But what I'm going to do is actually not squeeze all the wraps down like this like before. I'm not going to do that just yet, because we actually need them to be able to just move a little bit. But then once you've done that, you want to do the same on the other side here, roughly in the same place. But like I said, don't worry too much about it because it will be able to move up and down. So now that I wrap the other side as well in the exact same way, remember to make sure to finish the ends towards the inside, just like all the others. Then what we need to do is start creating the way that we're going to be able to capture the cabochon in. So the way that we're going to do that is by creating a bit of a cage for it. So I'd like to just have my cabochon here just for reference to be able to go back and measure against. But what we then need to do is start on one side here, because what we have is the 3 base wires. So we need to basically use the outer 2, one on each side, that we're going to then create the cage with, but then leave the middle one just as it is. So what I like to do is just start on the back side, it doesn't really matter. But then what I also like to use is actually flat nose pliers for this. And you can use your chain nose pliers, but the reason that I like using these is your chain nose pliers here, they have a very fine tip, so there's not really going to be much there. What we're going to have to do is go out the wire and then kind of pull it inward. Now obviously if you're just using your chain nose pliers like this, it might be a little bit difficult getting it even on both sides. So that's why I like to use my flat nose pliers, because you can kind of use the tip as a measurement. So that means I'm going to use that middle wrap on the bottom there as a guide, and on one side I'm going to place my flat nose pliers, pull the wire in, and do the same on the other side. And by that way I make sure that I get them pretty much as even as they can be, whereas the chain nose pliers you would have to do a bit more by eye. So that's why I like using the flat nose pliers for this. But then what we're going to do is start on one side and just make sure that the 2 wraps on the side are roughly about where you want them to be placed. Now they're still going to move up and down a little bit, and they probably will do when we're pulling the wires out, but just roughly that they're in place. So what you want to do is look at your 3 base wires, and on this side I'm just going to start on working on the back here. You want to capture literally just the very outside wire. So don't go too far in, because you're going to catch more than one. You just want to catch the very outside wire there, and just hold on it nice and tight. And then what I'm going to do is pull it inward. So I'm going to do a bit of a movement. Make sure you grab it nice and tight, but also just that one. You can just double check. And then what we need to do is pull it in. Just like that. So just a little bit of a wrist in your hand motion there, and then it looks like this. So quite nice and neat for now. What we need to do is do the same on the other side. So again, grab right next to that wrap in the middle, only the very outside wire on this side, and then just a wrist movement inward. And then you can always just look on the back here and then think, how does it look? And measure them against each other, the 2 sides. If you want to adjust anything, you can do that, because you can always pull them out a little bit more, or then pull them back a little bit to get them nice and even. And then as you can see, the wires on the side here, the wraps are kind of moved up a little bit from doing this, so you can just push them back down if you need to. But then this is the way that I find that you get the most even look there on the back. So what this is going to look like on the back if we place, this is the back of the cabochon, and that's just the one I'm doing first because we want to kind of make sure that that stays a bit flat against the frame there. So it's going to sit like this on the bottom to capture around the bottom of your cabochon there. So you see, nice and neat, we get an even look to it. So what we need to do now is work on the front, and we basically need to do the exact same thing. And I'm just going to start out by doing the same thing, but obviously what we need to do, because it's the front, and most cabochons or stones, they'll be a bit domed, but I'm going to worry about that afterwards. So we do the same thing, but on the opposite side. So work on the other side that you just did, so we leave that single wire in the middle there, untouched, and just do the same principle. You want to start right next to the wrap there on the bottom, place your flat nose pliers, if that's what you're working with, and just make sure you just grab that outer one. And then obviously you just want to kind of hold on to your piece as best you can without distorting any of the other work that you've just done. But then start pulling this outward in the exact same way. And now what you can do is up to you, is try and get them the same if you want to do that, or you could also do something different. You can make it more obvious or less obvious on the front. That's completely up to you, but I kind of just try and go for the same look. The same on the other side. Just capture that very outside wire and then pull it inward. So just like this. And then we have something that looks like this. Now as you can see, what happens, the reason that we don't want to tighten these wraps on the side is because the wires that you're pulling out, they need to be able to move a little bit in between that wrap just for now still. So you'll see here that they've moved a little bit out of shape past the wrap, but just pull them back in, that's absolutely fine. So it looks a little something like this. And again as well, like I said, if the distance from the bottom up to the sides have gone a little bit out of measurement there, so they're not quite even on both sides, you can just either push them down a little bit or pull them up if you need to. So that's just an adjustment we can do. But before I do that too much, what we need to just do is, as you can see, I've just pulled out both wires here on both sides, and there ain't really space for the cabochon down there because as you can see it won't really fit into there. So what we need to do is create that space now. So I'm just going to grab either my flat nose or chain nose pliers, whatever, bring that in there, and I'm just going to grab around the one that I want to be the front, and then I'm just basically going to pull that outward a little bit to make sure I don't distort the shape. That's why I also kind of like to use the flat nose pliers for that, so it keeps the shape in place that we've just made, but you're literally just kind of lifting it up, and that's just going to create that space for the cabochon. And you can just check it until you're happy with it, and then you can also just try the cabochon there. Now you don't necessarily have to pull out all the way so the cabochon will fit, because you can actually also use the cabochon itself to push down into it. So just get enough of a gap there that the cabochon will actually go into it itself. And if it doesn't quite fit yet, you can always open it up a bit more. So this is just again a bit of maneuvering until it sits completely right. But then this is the idea. It's going to capture the cabochon around the bottom there. On the back, that's flat as you can see, and then on the front it comes out a little bit just to be able to hold it in place. So that's how you want to do that bottom part of it. To capture the cabochon or the stone, just going to pull them out a little bit more. So just like this, and then kind of maneuver this a little bit until you're completely happy with how it sits. Keep trying the cabochon. Press it down into it so it sits nice and tight there, and you can kind of mold the whole frame around it. So just like that. And then once you're happy with it, what we need to do is secure the sides in place. So once you work with it a bit here, and you're happy with the way your cabochon sits inside there, and the way it looks both on the front and the back, then what we need to do is just secure the two sides in place, the same way as the bottom there. So all we do with that is just get either the flat nose or chain nose pliers, and then just make sure that that wrap is placed exactly where you want it to sit, and then we're going to go in and just squeeze that down as well. So just put a bit of force in there, squeeze it down nicely, and then again just bring the wraps together as well to keep them nice and neat. So just like that, and then on the other side do the same thing. So want to make sure that this one is in the right place compared to the other one. You can always place your cabochon in there as well to make sure that they're kind of sitting in the middle of the cabochon. But then when you're happy with that, place your pliers and squeeze it down. And then press them together. So just like this. So they are now nice and secure in place. So that's the bottom part of it done. So what we need to do now is kind of do a bit of capturing up here as well before we then start to do the bail. So then what I'm going to do is actually place my cabochon inside there, because just to use that to begin with as a bit of a guideline again. Place it how you want it to sit, so make sure it sits straight and it's pressed all the way down as well. And then I'm going to start bringing these top wires together, and what we need to do is basically intertwine them. So make sure that every other one is going between the opposite ones. So just like this. So you're basically doing this with your wires, just like that. Because then what we're going to do is bring the two front ones, so just try and hold it in place here, bring the two front ones a bit down over the front of the stone, so like this, and then the same with the two back ones, bring it over around the back. Just keep some nice curves in there, because we're kind of going to almost replicate the bottom a little bit so it looks nice and even. But obviously this is going to be the top, and then also turn into the bail from this. And then the two middle ones that are gone around the frame the whole way are also going to do that up here. So just gently place them to go and follow the shape of your cabochon basically, because that's what we want, and then meet there and cross over right at the top. So just like this. And then actually now your cabochon is kind of more secure in there already. But obviously we need to secure all the ends of the wires in place. So what we need to do now is start shaping these wires so it's going to actually capture the whole thing properly. So what I want to do first is actually bend the middle ones here, because if I get them bent now and to kind of start forming the bail, they're also going to be a little bit out of the way and it's easier to access now. So for this I'm going to use my chain nose, because I prefer using the finer point for this. And then what we need to make sure of is that we're bending these so they stay right in the center of the cabochon. So look at it in the center up here, but then also straight across from the bottom wrap there that we've done. So try and grab your wires, do one side at a time, just a little bit to the side of the middle. So just like that. And then we need to bend it up. So like I said, do one side at a time, and you can just gently hold this wire, because otherwise it might slip to one of the sides of the cabochon. But then just get an angle in there and bend it upward. So something like this. Do the same with the other side. So they meet nicely there in the middle of the top of the cabochon and come straight up, because these are then going to form part of the bail. So then once you have your two wires there coming straight up in the middle, you can always just kind of make sure they're pressed down to follow the shape completely by just gently pressing it around the front or the back, because that way when you let go it kind of springs back a bit and then sits just right around the top there. That's what that's going to look like. Now what we need to do is do the front and the back. So this is also a bit of maneuvering with your wires. You want to make sure that first off they're crossing over how you want them to sit, so pretty evenly like that. And whether you work on the front or the back first, it doesn't matter, because what you already have now is you already have the cabochon in there, so that's going to automatically dictate your wires as well, so you don't have to kind of lift any out. So what we need to do then is decide where we want the first bend, and I like to try and look on the bottom ones here as well, so roughly get it in the same place up here. So I grab where I want the bend to be with my, again I like to use my chain nose pliers, and then just bend my wire against the chain nose up a bit of an angle, and then just have a gentle curve to come back around again. Because if you notice on the bottom, that's also what it has down here when it comes from the very bottom wrap there. We can always just adjust this a bit more because these wires also need to come up and then also be part of the bail. So that's the first side. The other side, do the same thing. Try and get it even. So grab the place where you want to bend against, and then bend your wire against your pliers. So just do it gently like that. You can always move another wire out of the way because they are crossing over, so just move things as you need to. A bit like this. So the two wires again are coming up towards the middle there and meeting, and you can see they're crossing over with that bend in there, so it replicates the bottom. So it looks nice and neat like that, but it's also functional because it actually captures the stone in place. So that's the front. So I'm going to work my way on the back now and basically do the exact same thing. So again, make sure they're sitting correctly, the nice curves from the sides there. And then once you're happy with that, I'm going to put my chain nose pliers in where I want my bend to be, and then bring that up against my pliers, and then put that bit of a curve in. So just like this, and come up towards the middle where the other two wires are already, and then the same on the other side. Place your pliers and then put in your bend. And what you can do is, if you don't feel comfortable having the stone in there, obviously it also depends what stone you're using. If you're using quite a fragile one, you might want to do this without having the stone in there. But then you can just kind of place your pliers, take out the stone, and then bend against your pliers without the stone being in here. But this is quite a tough gemstone, so it'll be just fine. And obviously you want to be careful regardless what you're using. So just do things gently. But then we've got the same on the back here. You can just gently maneuver your wires until you're completely happy with how they sit. So these also come up towards the middle. So they're capturing the stone nicely. So we basically have the same at both the front and the back now. Like this. And then what we need to do is collect everything at the top here, because it's still loose as you can see, and then bind them together, and then also create the bail. So then what we need to do is, right now the wires at the front and the back here coming kind of out towards the side, we need them to go straight up just like the first ones that we did. So again, place your pliers, my chain nose pliers, just where you want that gentle bend to be, so it comes straight up, and then bend it so it goes straight up like with the other ones. Just like that. Same on the other side. Before you do this, make sure everything else sits as you want it to sit. Place your pliers and then bend it straight up. So just like that. And then as you can see there, because we then put the first bend in there and then that gentle curve, they sit nicely like that, and it kind of almost replicates the bottom as good as we can. Let's do the same thing on the back as well. Place your pliers and then bring it up. And don't worry about these being too straight just yet, we can always sort that out once we've just got them in place first. And bend it against your pliers. So just like that. As you can see, again they're going to sit like this and come straight up. And then this is going to also help form part of the bail. So this is basically capturing in place now. What we need to do is bring them all together at the top and secure all these in place, so it's nice and safe, but we can also start working on the bail. So now that we've reached this point and basically all the wires are in place, what we need to do now is kind of close this up here, because obviously they're still open, so you can still get the cabochon out if you kind of push it out, but otherwise it is in there securely now. So to do that, what we need to do is again get the 0.6mm. Either you can cut off a little length if you want to, or just work with it from the reel. And then what we need to do is wrap around up here, so all these wires, we have 6 in total, we have 3 coming from each side going straight up. So try and make sure that these wires are as straight as possible, so they lie all right next to each other. And then also what we want to do is basically have them so they lie 2 by 3. So on the sides we have 3 lying next to each other, and from the front or the back we have the 2. So they're kind of staggered like that, and try and keep them in that way as well. So what we're going to do is the same as all the other times. We need to start wrapping around them to keep them together. So I take a bit of a tail here just to hold on to as well. And then just try and keep them sat correctly right next to each other. And then just start wrapping gently, and a bit of tension in there. When you've made sure that all the wires are sitting the way you want them to sit, you can then add a bit of tension to your wrapping. And always continue up the other way. How many you do is kind of up to you. Again, I would say a minimum of about 3 or 4. Just to make sure it's going to hold nicely. And make sure to put a bit of tension in there as well. But still, without, when you're wrapping, make sure that your wires, your base wires there, don't get kind of stacked on top of each other. You can also along the way just take your pliers and then squash down a little bit. You don't have to do it too much or too hard, just gently, to kind of make sure that the wrapping wire sits tightly around the base wires. So when you're about happy with the amount of wraps that you've got, again, don't worry about the fact it's probably going to slide up the wires like this, but don't worry, because we can just push it back down once we're happy with how it sits. Then what we need to do is obviously finish off the tails of the wrapping wire here. So again, what I want to do with these, I want to finish them off so they sit on the side. So we need to get a wire cutter or a flush cutter. I'm going to cut this off on the side there, and then just squeeze the end in so it lies flat against the base wires, so you can't feel it. It's not too important because we'll be covering this up as well. So if this wrap isn't too neat either, don't worry too much about it. And this one I can just wrap it a little bit more. Have a bit of my tail left here just to get to the other side. And then also just cut off the excess, so the end is lying right on the side there, and squeeze it down. And then again, like the other ones, just you can go in and squeeze your coils or your wraps together so it becomes a bit more neat and even. And then make sure it sits how you want it to sit. You can just gently squeeze down a little bit, but then this is what it looks like. So now these wires, the base wires here, are all nice and secure, and you can just go check around and see if everything sits correctly. Now this is the point as well I want to say, if you want to adjust anything on the frame here, this is your last chance to do it. You can go in and just gently push or pull down a little bit if they're not exactly even. If one's a little bit higher, you can just gently pull down a bit, because they still move underneath that wrap. But that's what you want to do now, and once you are happy with it, to make sure it all stays in place, push your wrap as far down as it'll go. And then what we need to do is look at our base wires up here. What we're going to have is 6, so if we just try and split them out a little bit gently to begin with. So we're basically going to have 2 towards the front. It's going to be those 2. And we'll have 2 towards the back, those 2, and then the 2 in the middle. So that's what we have now, because we have them lying 2 across the front and the back, and then 3 down the sides. So what I'm going to do is bend down the 2 front ones like that. That's why make sure your wrap there is all the way down, as far down as it'll go. And also this is why you want to make sure everything sits correctly now, because we're bending these wires down, and then you can't adjust it anymore. And the back ones we do the same, just bend them down so they kind of go out to each their own corner, almost like this. And then the last 2 in the middle here are the ones that we're actually going to make the bail with. So to do that, we need to get something out that we're actually going to be able to form the bail around. Now I'm just going to use a crochet hook here. I have this set where there's loads of different sizes that comes in handy for this kind of thing, but you can also use just anything, any kind of mandrel or an actual bail making plier or something like that. It's completely fine, just something that has the shape and size you want your bail to be. So then make sure all these are pushed down so they're out of the way, and then what we're going to do is gently just push them forward a little bit so they come a bit at an angle like that. So the bail's going to sit right on top there, and then just make sure they're pushed together as well so they come up straight next to each other. And then I'm just going to put my crochet hook behind here, or whatever you're using, as far down as it'll go, and then start bending these around the back. You can always use this to help push it forward because it'll want to pull backwards a bit, but make sure that that bail stays right on top so you get a bit of a hook shape like that. And then what I'm going to do is again make sure they sit right next to each other, as close as you can get them. Then I'm going to split them up, and the one that's furthest to the left side I'm going to keep on the left side, wrap around on its own on your crochet hook or your mandrel, and then around the back one more time like that. Do the same on the other side, wrap it around the side it's coming from on its own, just like that. So they're both now again coming down on the back, and that's going to basically be a bail. What we need to do is then cut off the excess wire. So I'm going to get my flush cutters again and then cut down so I have just a little bit of length coming down from the bail like that. Do the same on the other side. So we're just getting rid of the excess wire now, and I'll just make sure they're about the same length. Needs to be a little bit shorter, so like that. And then you can always, if you want to make sure, put your mandrel or whatever you're using back in just to make sure that bail keeps its shape, and just press these ends in so they're not sticking out, because then they won't catch or scratch on anything, because you got to make sure of that. So just press them against, so the base of the ends are finishing right in where all the wires are coming out from. So just like this. Now that is done. So what we have left now are these 4 wires, 2 on each side, are kind of coming to each their own corner. What I'm going to do with these are actually coil them to finish them off. So to do that, I just like to go in and cut them down, all of them at the same time here before I start coiling them, just to try and make sure they get roughly the same length. So the actual finished coils are going to be roughly the same size. So cut them down to however long you want them to be. Now the length of this is going to help determine how large your coils are going to be, or your swirls. So just try and get them all as even as you can. You can always cut them down and then go in and just judge them. If they look even, fine. If not, then just cut a little bit extra off some of them if you feel like you need to. So this is what we have now. I'm going to work with these lengths. You can always cut a bit extra off, just as we're starting out the coil as well. So I'm going to start with one, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my round nose pliers here and furthest towards the tip to get the beginning as nice and small as possible, and at the end of my wire start making that swirl. So you start with a little loop like that, and what I'm doing is when you're looking at the piece, I'm curling that way, so back inwards towards the bail, but towards that wrap, so, and then basically downward as well. But then what I also always like to do is just cut off the very tip when I've just done the very first swirl there, just to get a little bit more rounded, and then just keep going. And you can obviously make your swirls however you want to. I like to get mine quite tight, but that's completely up to you. And then you can switch over to your chain nose pliers or flat nose pliers and help it along the rest of the way until you get it all the way in where this wire is actually coming out from. That's what we want. So just like this. So basically it's going to sit partly at the front there and covers, that's what I meant as well earlier, cover that wrap up. So that's why you didn't have to worry too much about that being neat. So that's the first one. I'm going to do the same with all the others. And again coiling, so my swirl is going inwards and downwards. And again, just try and get it as tight as you can if that's what you want. Cut off a little bit. And then keep coiling it, and swirling it. And then when you have to, switch over to your chain nose pliers and finish it off. So as you can see, this, we're moving inwards now, and this is going to then end up sitting on the other side of the bail, kind of in the same way. So just like this. And then this is just basically a bit maneuvering now to get him to sit exactly how you want him to sit. You can bring him a bit further forward and a bit tighter like that. And then before I completely kind of press them in place, I want to do the back ones as well. And now this is the same principle. We're treating this as if it was the front as well. So just start your coil, do it downwards and inwards. So do those both in the same way as well, and you'll end up with the same as the front. So then once you've made your swirls there, both at the front and at the back, what you'll be able to see is they're still a bit open, so that's what I want to fix now. Because I'm going to be using these to hide that wrap in the beginning to get the bail going, but also just as a bit of an embellishment and finish off the wires as well. So all you want to do is just press them down, and then I like to kind of press them in against each other towards the side there, but at the same time make sure that kind of half of the swirl is coming across both the front and the back as well. And do the same on the other side. And you can just do this with your fingers. So it basically covers up the whole bottom of the bail there. So just like this, so keep doing that until you're happy with how they sit, and they're basically covering up everything. Especially if your wrap wasn't too neat, so like I said, you didn't have to worry about that at all. And then also you won't have any of the ends to be able to catch or scratch on anything while you're wearing it. So that is basically the finished piece now. And then you have your other ends finished in there. So that's how you make this piece, and you have your bail ready, and it's now ready to wear. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and that it was useful, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to wire up a cabochon using the netting technique. And this is what it could look like. So this is just with an oval stone, and this is the example that I'll be showing you. So the front and then the back. But this technique will really work for many different shapes of cabochons. So that's what it's really good for. To show you an example of that, of some other ones I've made, I also made